Oh, these little liars. I told y'all that Jax was the ringleader. I told y'all. He sat in this interview and he was telling stories about shit that he wasn't even there to witness. So let's break down some of the stuff that I heard in this interview. Let's start with Warren's first phone call, because y'all will remember that Warren said that he was over at Ava's house for that 4th of July party when they all started realizing that Nolan was missing, and he called Miss Christine at 11 o'clock.
One of the first things I told Miss Christine Wells in the first phone call that ever occurred with anything to do with Nolan Wells being gone, because I was the first person to call Miss Christine about anything. First phone call, anything to do with Nolan Wells, was me making a phone call to Christine Wells. And one of the first things I said to her, with multiple witnesses here, pull up the phone call if you want. She said, oh, well, Nolan's location is with y'all at, where the house we were at. And I was like, well, no, he left his phone with us. I told her this.
And yesterday, the same time that this interview came out, Christine Wells said this.
360 says that he's on land, and he was like, well, no, I mean, well, we have his phone.
So both versions of the story say that Warren didn't tell her about the phone until after she confronted him with the 360. Now, Warren tells Miss Christine that he knows somebody in the Coast Guard and that he's going to call them, which is very fucking different than calling the Coast Guard, which absolutely explains why the Coast Guard came out and said at first that they had not received a call from the kids that night. The Coast Guard's initial statement said they weren't informed until 12:30. Then the Coast Guard later changed their story and said, oh wait, actually we did. And it seems to me that that first call was most likely an off-the-record to a friend kind of deal, which means these people freaked out and didn't call the Coast Guard until after all these people showed up at Jax's house. Which would explain why in the course of this interview it went from Warren called the Coast Guard to we did. Now, when the subject turns to how the family got the phone back from these boys, you'll notice that there was a couple slip-ups.
Warren, you weren't at the house, and so you weren't there when they came to get the phone and all that. So
now remember, Warren just said that he wasn't at the house when the phone was got. And then Morgan talks about getting a phone call from one of the people in Christine Wells' group.
And how did they get the phone back?
So I got a call from a kid we went to high school with. He called me just asking me questions. He saw people posting on Snapchat, like the picture that was circulating.
Except this picture wasn't posted until July 5th. So how could this picture have been circulating on Snapchat that night? But let's continue.
And he called and he was asking questions. He was like, where's Nolan? When's the last time y'all seen him? And then he was like, so where are y'all at? And I told him, I said, we're at Jax's house. And then Warren got on the phone, and I don't know.
So they come to my house, right? And they kind of
hold on before we get there. Was it confrontational or was it just just trying to find? It was confrontational.
Yeah,
already?
wouldn't y'all agree?
Yeah.
He was 110%.
He was very
confrontational.
And when did this was this on the night of the 4th or the next day?
This was the night when this was before they came and got the phone.
So this is the night of the 4th, yes.
You guys are missing a part of the story. How did you get from Ava's house to Jax's house? Because Miss Christine is watching you guys on the Life 360. So suddenly she's seeing the phone leave one location and go to another. Of course I would be upset. And now all of a sudden Warren is there when the phone stuff starts happening? He's listening to the phone call? Now I need y'all to remember that Warren also said that the phone was in his truck on the first conversation, as we have from this report. Meaning if we were to believe Warren that he was not there when everybody showed up looking for the phone at some time in between 11 and 1 a.m., so then that would mean after they heard this angry phone call, Warren gets the phone out of his vehicle and puts it in Jax's house and then leaves.
Now let's talk about what this actually means, because this isn't just TikTok drama. This is a pattern, conflicting statements, stories that shift depending on who's doing the interview, and pressure applied to a grieving mother for daring to ask one question: where was my son's phone, and who had access to it? That's the question Christine Wansley has been asking since Nolan's body was found on Horn Island, July 6th, 2 days after he vanished during a 4th of July trip with friends. And when his phone came back, she says it didn't come back the way it left. On August 10th, Tyler Cox, the attorney representing 3 of Nolan's friends, made a stunning claim on SiriusXM with Dan Abrams. I have reason to believe, and I do believe, that the Wells family have not cooperated with law enforcement. I do not think that they have turned in Nolan's phone, and I'm willing to bet my reputation on that. The friend's lawyer, not the family, not the prosecution, going on national radio saying the family is withholding evidence. He said police don't have the phone and asked, "How can you say there's texts missing or photographs missing?" On the surface, that sounds reasonable, but only if you ignore what Christine already told Good Morning America, and if nobody checks what was actually agreed to. So let's check. On August 11th, an attorney for Wells's parents sent a letter to the district attorney stating the family remains ready to arrange a joint forensic inspection of the phone, referencing a July 15th meeting, 9 days after Nolan's body was found. A joint forensic examination, not a handoff. The family's forensic experts, the DA's office, and possibly the FBI, all in the room, one device, one download. That was the agreement, according to the family's attorneys. Then nothing happened for nearly a month. Then on August 12th, the DA sent a letter telling them to simply deliver the phone directly to law enforcement, which the family says differs from the joint review process they believed had been agreed to. And they gave the family less than 48 hours, while the family was out of town and couldn't meet the deadline. Lay the sequence out. July 15th, agreement to a joint examination. A month of silence. August 11th. The family reaffirms willingness. August 12th, the DA says just hand the phone over. August 13th, the family says that's not what was agreed. Then the narrative becomes, the family is refusing to cooperate. Does that sound like refusal or a setup? The dispute centers on the method and shared oversight of the examination, not a flat refusal. The family never said no, they said, "We want to be in the room with an independent forensic expert present, raising the digital forensics lab at Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College, with possible FBI involvement." That is not what a cover-up looks like. And after everything that's happened in this case, can you blame them for not trusting the process? Because here's the thing about that phone. Christine already saw something on it. She told Good Morning America that when family members reviewed Wells's phone, they found no Snapchat videos or images on either of his two accounts, particularly concerning since Wells routinely photographed social gatherings, leading them to believe material may have been deleted. On July 4th, a holiday, a boat trip, an island party with hundreds of people, both accounts were completely empty. Trace's Tin Shepherd offered an explanation. Nolan wanted to stay because he'd met a girl, and the group kept their phones on the boat because they were in salt water. So the phone stayed on the boat and left with the friends. Nobody had a reason to touch it. But if nobody touched it, where did the Snapchat data go? His parents found the accounts wiped clean, and location data that conflicted with what they knew of their son. That's not a glitch, that's a pattern investigators know how to read. New subpoenas request information tied to Wells's accounts on Snapchat, WhatsApp, TikTok, Meta platforms, and Life 360. Mississippi attorney Gary Bufkin filed them, going after messages, photos, GPS data, and timestamps, since even deleted device content may still exist on platform servers. Retired FBI agent Kieran Ramsey told NewsNation investigators may recover several layers of data even if it was deleted, and can follow preservation letters with grand jury subpoenas if needed. The question is who's actually trying to get it, and who's been slowing that down. That brings us to Officer Tatum, Brandon Tatum, a conservative commentator and former Tucson police officer who traveled to Mississippi positioning himself as a fact-finder. To his credit, he sat down with the friends face-to-face on camera. TMZ reported obtaining clips of attorney Tyler Cox and his clients, Warren Hudson, Jax Pitalo, and Morgan Seymour, on the Officer Tatum show, where the three said they wished they'd never gone to Horn Island and believed Nolan would still be alive if they'd stayed home. Tatum also interviewed Trace's Tin Shepherd separately, who described himself as one of Nolan's best friends. "Nobody would ever hurt Nolan in our friend group. We would die for him," visibly emotional on camera. But here's the friction. When NewsNation's Chris Cuomo asked Elmore Wansley about Trace's tin, he said he didn't recognize him. Just because you park your vehicle in someone's yard doesn't mean that they have to know you. Either Trace's tin is telling the truth and the father simply never met him, or his closeness to Nolan has been overstated, and this matters because his account shapes the counter-narrative. Trace's tin, who is biracial, denied doing anything to harm Nolan and disputed the idea that race played a factor. Tatum agreed. So you have an outside commentator interviewing people the family doesn't recognize as close to Nolan, then using those interviews to publicly challenge the family's narrative. Journalist Jemel Hill remarked that choosing that podcast in particular was quite the choice. Tatum went back to interview the friends a second time, while the family's phones still hadn't been jointly examined.
There's probably like 10, 15 people in my house I don't even know. And they're all up in our faces, going crazy, asking where Nolan is, and we don't know. And finally they get into Wyatt's face, and they're like, "Where's your boat? Where's the boat at?"
Demanding his address.
Demanding his address and stuff like that. And he finally ends up giving it to him.
We give them the phone. They have the phone at this point. Then they get the address to his house. Then they go to his house. And they're searching all over his boat, what I heard and stuff like that. Well, anyways, I don't really know much about that, but they come back to my house at around 1 o'clock in the morning. We called law enforcement. I was with Wyatt at the time after we left Jackson's house that night. I was with Wyatt, and one person we were with saw that their location was headed towards Wyatt's house. And so Wyatt got on the phone with 911 and was like, "Hey, these people are on the way to my house, or already at my house. My mom and my dad are there alone, and they know nothing about this." But Wyatt's mom actually, when they were looking at the boat, they were actually walking from the boat, and she came out and started talking to them.
Because while all of this played out publicly, something else was happening to Christine. On August 5th, Ben Crump announced the Mississippi Board of Nursing had opened a misconduct investigation against her, based on an anonymous complaint filed only after she began asking questions publicly. This is a warning shot at a grieving mother meant to pressure and scare her into staying quiet, Crump said. The board later closed the case. It should never have been filed in the first place. It was frivolous, it was unfounded. Supporters say Christine was also hit with one-star reviews on her professional profile and received hate mail before her son's funeral. In 5 weeks, she lost her son, was told his phone came back with data missing, got a 48-hour deadline she couldn't meet, was accused of refusing to cooperate, had her nursing license targeted, and was review-bombed. That's not coincidence. That's a campaign. Meanwhile, the state autopsy remains sealed, with no date attached for grand jury review. The family's independent autopsy came back undetermined, in part because parts of Nolan's throat were missing by the time their pathologist examined the body. State medical examiners retained portions for further study, which experts say isn't unusual, but it left the exam incomplete. The family's attorney, Ahmad Smith, sent a letter asking prosecutors to help their pathologist access materials from the first autopsy. At every turn, someone is slowing the process, changing the terms, or attacking Christine personally. 3 out-of-state people have been arrested for alleged violent threats connected to this case. An Illinois man allegedly threatened to kill multiple people and police officers. An Ohio woman allegedly made bomb threats to 2 Mississippi county offices. And a California man, Joseph Dumars, was arrested for allegedly sending bomb threats via Facebook Messenger to Jackson County Chancery Court Judge Ashley Cole, Warren Hudson's mother, including one referencing "so much blood everywhere, especially from a boat." This case has escalated beyond anything a simple accidental drowning would generate. 6 weeks in, and not one forensic examiner has conducted a full download of that phone. Now let's talk about the contradictions the internet has been surfacing, since putting statements side by side lets them speak for themselves. The first centers on Katie McCormick, the young woman the friends say Nolan stayed behind to talk to. The friend's story: Nolan wanted to stay with Katie, told them to go, he'd find another ride. But Katie's family tells a different version. Katie had a conversation and assumed that Nolan was getting ready to get on the boat he came out on, her sister Gracie McCormick told the Daily Mail. Katie assumed the friends telling him to get on the boat wouldn't have left him. She thought he was getting on the boat. The friends say he refused. Those two things cannot both be true. Somebody must not be telling the truth, Crump said. It gets deeper. The friends say Nolan chose to stay, that they begged him to leave. Warren Hudson claims someone was panicking, yelling for Nolan to get on the boat. But Nolan didn't have his phone, and was left on an uninhabited barrier island 10 miles from the mainland with no way to call anyone. His parents say they had cell service when they searched the island on July 5th, contradicting the friend's account of no service. "To me, that's 2 lies I was told as a father," Elmore said, getting emotional. Now the enhanced audio, which deserves careful handling. The recording is the July 4th CETO call one of Nolan's friends made as their boat took on water. "We're at the west tip of Horn and our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking." TMZ enhanced that audio, and the debate exploded. Some claim to hear, "Is he dead?" and "Nolan," followed by "Oh my God," and elsewhere, "Check his chest," and "Wake up." None of those interpretations have been confirmed. Digital forensics expert Robert Fried said he could not corroborate TMZ's claims after comparing versions. The TMZ version was 20 seconds longer than the original with a different digital fingerprint. That's a forensic red flag. Either the enhancement captured background voices that were always there, or the version was altered. No official source has verified either. But the original call raises questions on its own. The dispatcher asks basic questions the caller struggles to answer, and at one point the caller can be heard yelling at someone on the boat to be quiet. Who and why? Forensic audio specialists on Crump's team are reviewing the complete call, while ocean engineering experts examine how Wells's body came to be recovered near the same tip of the island where he was last seen. Nolan was last seen at the west tip of Horn Island. His body was found at the northwestern tip. If he drowned and the tides carried him, his body should have moved. The Gulf has currents and tidal patterns, and bodies don't typically stay in the same area after 2 days. A newly completed independent analytical review of photographs, videos, GPS coordinates, and witness accounts concluded that the available evidence still leaves a material gap in the timeline between Wells's last independently corroborated sighting and the reported departure of the boat. The 22-page report reaches no conclusion about criminal or civil responsibility, but flags evidence investigators may still need. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer weighed in. "When you add it all together, what we see publicly seems to be an accident." But she added a caveat: "I doubt if this, what we know, will come back with the truth," warning more details could still emerge. About 60 witnesses have been interviewed, and there's still a material gap in the timeline. The case is headed to a Mississippi grand jury, which will decide whether anyone is charged. The DA says evidence stays out of public view until the grand jury reviews it first. Standard procedure, District Attorney Angel Myers-McElrath has said. The family's attorney, Eric Hertz, told NPR he believes the case could go before a grand jury in under 30 days, putting it around mid to late September. Several of Wells's friends have retained high-profile lawyers in case of wrongful death suits and to potentially file defamation suits of their own. Not charged, not publicly named suspects, but that level of legal preparation doesn't quite match the story of a simple accident.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Wyatt, Morgan, and Jax were all together. Warren was gone for some reason at this point. 10 to 15 people just barge into your house. Don't know why your grandparents weren't around. That might explain some things, huh? Guess y'all had the house all to your fucking self that weekend. But then they ask Wyatt for his address so that they can go look at the boat. Wyatt gives them the address. They start heading over there. Wyatt and Morgan get into a car and leave Jax's house. Somebody else that you were with that we aren't hearing about is tracking someone else's phone. I don't know if it was somebody who was with the group that they had access to, or if they were tracking Nolan's phone and they saw it was heading to Wyatt's house. And even though Wyatt gave them the address, and instead of calling his parents, he calls 911 and tells them, "My parents don't know anything about that's going on. Can you send police over there?"
The Congressional Black Caucus sent a letter to the Attorney General and FBI Director calling for federal review, with Chair Yvette Clarke writing that the scanned information from local investigators has members concerned. That doesn't happen for every accidental drowning. As of the most recent reporting, the phone has not been forensically examined by either side, not the family's team, not law enforcement. Nobody. The independent pathologist still hasn't reviewed the retained autopsy materials. The state autopsy is sealed. The grand jury has no date. And in the meantime, the friends were doing national media tours while the mother's nursing license was under attack. A man was arrested for allegedly making bomb threats toward a judge connected to this case. That is unacceptable, full stop. There have been bomb threats, death threats to police officers, calls to county offices from people in other states. Threatening people is not justice, and it makes the families fight harder while giving ammunition to those who want to dismiss their legitimate questions as mob behavior. It needs to stop. What the family wants is simple: a transparent investigation, the phone examined with oversight, the state autopsy released, the grand jury shown everything. Nothing held back, nothing overlooked, Crump said. Elmore Wansley said something that should sit with every parent listening. We always taught him, if you go with a group, you stay with the group. If you go with 5, you come back with 5. A son who followed the rules, who his parents say would never have voluntarily stayed on an uninhabited island without his phone or a plan. If the friend's story is true, a young man made an impulsive decision on a hot afternoon and paid for it with his life, a real, devastating, preventable tragedy. But if it isn't true, then what happened is something else entirely, and the evidence needs to see daylight. The receipts being surfaced online aren't gossip, they're accountability, citizens comparing statements and checking timelines when institutions move slowly. That only works if we stay disciplined, separate what's confirmed from what's interpreted, name our sources, and hold space for the possibility this case may end differently than we expect. This is an 18-year-old kid who went to an island with his friends on the 4th of July and never came home. His name is Nolan Xavier Wells. He was a football player, a son, somebody's everything. And his mother has spent every day since July 6th fighting, not for vengeance, but for answers, for a transparent process, for the right to know what happened to her child. So here's the question. Is it true the family refused to hand over the phone? The evidence says no, they refused to hand it over without oversight. That's a different thing, and it matters. Is it true that Officer Tatum's interviews changed the narrative? Yes, whether toward truth or away from it is a question only the evidence can answer. When you line up the contradictions, the Katie McCormick discrepancy, the phone data, the enhanced audio questions, the material gap, the Congressional Black Caucus letter, the sealed autopsy, the nursing board complaint, something is not right, and the longer the answers take, the louder that becomes. We'll keep following this case, for Nolan, for Christine, for the principle that when an 18-year-old dies and the story doesn't add up, somebody has an obligation to keep asking. If this case affected you, subscribe so you don't miss the next update. Now I want to hear from you. What stands out to you most? Drop it in the comments. Because this community doesn't just watch, we question and we hold the line until there are real answers. For Nolan.
Now, mind you, it was about half an hour after being on the phone with Warren that Christine was able to actually call and report him missing. But she was having to go back and forth and go down to all these different agencies because nobody would fucking help her. And frankly, I want to know why all of this confrontation was left out of the fucking report. Like, if this family had to be removed from 2 different properties by the police, why is there no record of that? And in fact, it wasn't until after these confrontations that MDMR and Ocean Springs Police apparently had their little conversations about who was going to be taking over the case. Because remember, the Jackson County Sheriff Lieutenant told them that deputies had spoken with several friends that had traveled to the island on the vessel with Nolan, and that when they were left, he was in the company of an unknown female. So now, even though Warren had supposedly called the Coast Guard, all these family members are telling the police that the kid is missing. These are the people that last saw them. They're all like, we last saw him on the island. Still, the deputies said that they did not have reason to believe that there was any water-related exigencies or emergencies. Don't worry, y'all. I've got a lot fucking more to say about this stuff, so come back for part 2. I'm going to be immediately recording it because Warren fucked up pretty badly in this interview, and I'll show you why.